Welcome to the Author Corner, our chance to meet the authors you'll want to read. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so excited to be joined by a husband-wife team of authors today. Susannah Pratt is the author of How Do You Do? My Name is Sue. And her husband George had to get in on the action also and has a major hand in upstate DA. My time as a Steuben County prosecutor, well, in the 1930s, so we know his hand is not the original, but we'll talk. But so nice to meet you both. Thanks for joining me.
That's fine.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And Susannah, I got to meet you first.
Yes.
With your memoir. Tell me about your whole life. I mean, we're a little microcosm, and how you got started writing, because that's just amazing.
Well, it was COVID that actually started.
A COVID book. I love COVID books.
I was widowed for a very long time and very happy and not planning to remarry, but coming up, it'll be over 6 years that we're married.
You're newlyweds.
We're newlyweds, yes. And so he still had a lot of work he could do, and we were kind of housebound. And I happened to see a college online program, and so I thought there was one, how to write a chapter of your life. And so I thought, well, I could do that. So I started, and it was a group of men and women my age or a little younger, and kind of the same idea. We all have all these volumes of stories, but never thought anybody would care about them. So I took the first course, and I wrote the term paper. And the teacher said, you know, I think you ought to take part 2. And so I did, and I elaborated a little bit more. And then she said, I really think there's a book in it.
Oh, wow.
So it was thanks to the teacher. And so that's how it happened.
Wow, wow. How was it going down that memory lane? Were you overwhelmed with so many thoughts that you thought, I have to narrow it down, or were you diving deep?
Yes, because the term paper was, you know, sort of just, it was really, I guess, I thinking ahead to my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I wanted to put some names and dates and genealogical kinds of information. And so that was pretty easy. And then it seemed to uncork something, and all these little memories kept popping out. And George would say to me, I never heard that story before.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
no, it wasn't an effort. It's amazing what your mind has, what capabilities it has.
Right. Well, I mean, just looking at the cover with you in the African wilds feeding a rhino, we know it's been quite the journey.
Yes, it has been quite the journey. Wonderful trips, and in that particular case, I went with a co-worker, and there were just 6 of us on safari, so we were able to have experiences like that.
You weren't scared while you were doing this?
No, really the truth is he was pretty old, and I think they woke him up, and I think he was blind. But I did learn there are 2 types of rhinos, black and white, and that depends on where their mouth is, whether they're ground feeders or they feed off plants.
Oh, okay.
So that was interesting.
Now, do those safari leaders, because I've fortunately traveled, but
Yeah.
never on safari, do they know where the blind and deaf animals are so you can have these experiences?
I don't think so. I went with a tour company I really like, and as I said, there were just 6 of us, and they have always planned unique opportunities. But with a limited number of travelers, they can do that. You know, we could go into someone's home for dinner, and we could, you know,
nice.
things like that. Whereas if you have a larger group, it's a little harder.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. So you got started because of an online course.
Right.
Lockdown, what am I going to do with my spare time?
Correct.
Started this online course, and next thing you know, you have a book in your hand.
Right.
Now, so many other people want to do this.
Yes.
And they really do. I mean, surveys say 90% of the population wants to write a book. And I'm sure that your class was filled with people
Yes.
who didn't get this far. So
Right.
tell me how you managed to get from that. And I, so commend your teacher, but really, it's you. So what's your secret to get here?
I think one is just start. There's some people who have the story in their mind from chapter 1 to the conclusion. And then there's other people who have a story here or there. it doesn't matter. Just start. And, you know, and then it'll start to flow or it won't. And then do some research on writing. There's millions of books on how to learn to write a story or a book. And the helpful part is where my language would be pretty simple. The sky is blue. And then you'd read, well, no, you know, when I opened the door, the wind was blowing and I noticed the white cloud. It was such a difference in the way you write.
Yes. So you were growing as a writer.
Absolutely.
As you were doing this. Now, since it's personal, I do want to ask, you know, some people write fiction and it's very impersonal. This is very personal.
It is very personal.
So it really is your story. And after it was published, or even maybe before when it was still in different stages, did anybody read this or have, I mean, you have children and grandchildren. Were they surprised by anything in here?
Yeah, no, I didn't share it with anybody but George and then with you later on. I thought it was just like writing a term paper. I really wasn't anticipating where it would go. And I really have to say that the teacher that I had connections with publishing. And so when she said you should do it, she's the one who really pushed me over the edge to do it.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Now, since then, you know, because life is different, before book and after book.
Right.
You know, BB and AB.
Right.
Now, you have children, grandchildren, I hear like
great-grandchildren.
Over 60.
Between us, yes.
Well, at least you know you got book sales.
Right.
Instant book sales right there.
It was interesting. I hadn't really thought about selling it. It was just the exercise of doing it.
Right.
Just recently I learned there's a chapter in there about a man named Jim who played a major part in raising my family because they were pretty young when my husband died. And I found out that his son bought 4 copies of the book because there's a whole chapter about his dad.
That's amazing.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. And what a gift to people, you know, and I'm going to talk about the gift with George's book especially, but for you, 60 children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and eventually more to come that won't get to know you.
Right.
And some, I'm sure, are very, very young. And when they're a little older, they can really get to know you. And what a gift that is.
I think that too, plus having names and dates and places. When you're doing any kind of genealogical work, or if you want to store your records, on the back of the papers, on the back of the photos, put the county that this took place in, because many of the records are kept in county courthouses.
Okay.
So you can't just say the state of Michigan or the state of New York.
Right.
So that's a really good thing.
Oh,
if
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Leaving papers for your children and grandchildren, they can do that.
And I like how it used to be when you had hard copy photos, if people would write the names and the dates on the back, but so many are now digital.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, makes it much more difficult.
It is, because anybody that does research, my dad was very much into history, and through many years of effort, and not through me, but my granddaughter, we became DAR, and it's called the Cameo DAR because it's 3 generations. It's myself, 2 of my daughters, and my granddaughter. And so that would help give genealogical research too.
Nice, nice.
So it's all good.
And 4 copies to Jim's son. Well,
yes.
That must have been a big surprise.
It was.
He said, wow, here's what Dad was doing that month.
Because I knew him differently, of course, than his son did. And
of course.
So I think it was good, and it gives another peek into what happened during World War II.
Yes.
He was 5 years in Italy and went from the boot all the way up to Lake Como in the infantry, but he always had good things to say about people.
Well, that's what a memoir is. You know, it might be your story, but it's also the story of, you know, Long Island for decades and decades. Yeah. And it really, you know, when you read it, it's so easy to say, wait a minute, I went to that place.
Right.
I remember doing that same thing. So when you read memoirs, one of the wonderful things is to put yourself in that place
Yeah.
because there is so much. When I was reading yours, oh, I've been there.
Yeah, right?
You know, there's so much of that. And really, we're talking about many decades worth of Long
Yes.
Island here,
Yes,
which
we
is
are.
just amazing.
Yeah.
So now that this book is done, is there another one in you?
You know, when they said that generally, if you do one, you start thinking about another one. So last year or so, I thought might be fun to try fiction because then you can go off on any tangent
Well,
and you don't have to prove it. So I'm kicking it around.
Kicking it around. You know, especially this involved a lot of introspection and a lot of research and fiction, like you said, while you certainly want to be consistent
Yeah.
with whatever your story is, you get to make it all up
Yeah.
and decide everybody's ending all by yourself.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun.
That is kind of fun. I'm anxious to read your next thing.
Okay.
I keep telling her that she should write a sequel to How Do You Do? My Name is Sue.
Well, that's true because when this left off, how old were you?
There's it goes close to 90.
There's been more living since then.
Yeah.
She keeps telling me things that I never heard before, and she can write a book, Things I Forgot.
I love that, George. And since you two are newlyweds, you got to read the book and say, "Oh, I didn't know that."
Maybe it's good he read it after we were married.
I love that. Well, the act of writing seems to have inspired more.
Yes.
And I am so excited about your foray into writing. You've written a million times before, so share with our audience a little bit about your background so I can jump into this, because certainly this is not your first writing
No,
exercise.
I went to law school. From there, I was a clerk to a judge in the New York Court of Appeals. Went into private practice on Long Island. After 20 years, I was appointed a United States District Judge. That's the trial judge in the federal system. And I served there for 6 years, and then was appointed to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals and served there for another 14 years, I guess it was. Then I retired, and in retirement, I started teaching full-time at Toro Law Center, and then people started asking me to be an arbitrator, and I found that was the best thing I'd ever done in the law. Great cases, and I got paid unconscionable sums of money. And continued as an arbitrator until after I got married to Sue and got so old that I guess the attorneys didn't want to take a chance on my not surviving to the end of the case.
Oh, you're not that old.
But what inspired me to trigger this book, when Sue was in one of the interviews related to the publishing her book, there was another author, Michael Vecchione, I think his name was, who had been assistant district attorney in Brooklyn. And he described the book he had written and the cases that he had worked on. And as I sat there and listened to him, I suddenly remembered that my father had written a book about his 3 years as a district attorney in Steuben County in upstate New York. And when he died, somehow the book got into my possession, and it was just typewritten.
Right.
And it's in a box about
Yep.
that thick. And I had just stuck it on a shelf in my office in the house. And I thought, Dad wrote about his cases, and they're much more interesting than what Vecchione is talking about. So I pulled the thing out, checked it out, called Stephanie and said,
Yes.
I've got a book for you. Would you like to publish it?
And what a book.
She
What a
said,
book.
yes, send it to me, and I'll let you know. And she answered finally, she said, I'd be delighted to publish it,
Yeah.
but on one condition, that you'll write an introduction.
Yes.
So I wrote I guess a 20-page
Yes.
introduction to the thing, but basically describing my father and his career. Also, after he was district attorney, he became surrogate judge and continued in that job for 28 years. He wrote the book toward the end of his term as surrogate judge. So there are 20-odd chapters of stories of cases that he experienced between 1933, I guess it was, and 1936. And he gives a pretty accurate flavor of life in Steuben County at that time.
Yes.
He had called it upstate DA
Yes.
and pointed out the difference between a district attorney in Steuben County, which is a one-man job, and it's a part-time job, and what they have in the big cities, where you've got a DA who's an executive and he's got 5 or 6 assistants or more. And Dad describes what it's like to be out there in the field with the cops investigating cases and so forth. I have found his book quite interesting to me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I loved receiving, hundreds of pages typed on a very, you could tell, the old typewriter from the typeset
Oh, yeah.
right across, just to hold the original is just so amazing to me. But I'm thrilled that since we can't really share the original freely, that we were talking about what a gift a memoir always is. But this is such a gift to an entire county, state, an era. It really is. It is really a picture of not just your dad and what he did, but what was going on up there. The gambling and the rocketing.
He did have some remarkable cases for a small county in upstate New York.
I'm as amazed. What were they doing up there,
Well, Dewey had cracked down on the mafia in New York, and many of them had moved up to Binghamton. And they were operating out of Binghamton, and it's just a couple of counties away. Mm-hmm. And a couple of his cases came in direct contact with the mafia people.
That's amazing. Yeah, when you first mentioned it to me, I thought he was a DA in Steuben County, New York. What could have possibly happened?
Wow.
And then when I saw how many pages arrived in the mail, I said, wow, a lot of pages of nothing.
And best of all, Dad, as a lawyer, had written his own briefs and so forth. He was also the son of a newspaper publisher and editor. He came very close to going into that occupation rather than being a lawyer. And he had done a lot of editing and so forth. So he writes well.
Absolutely.
Got some writing characteristics I had to tweak a little bit, but not much.
Not much, not much. And to write well on a typewriter, you only get one shot.
Right. Not like a computer.
Yeah, no, you only get one shot. But then I saw all the little notes you had made also. You had little notes in the columns and whatnot. And some of them were just personal reflections, which was so enjoyable to read. And like I said, what a gift and what a tribute to your father. you know. Do you think that your father is saying, thanks for publishing, or, oh gosh, I was hoping that was still in a drawer somewhere?
No, I know he was trying to publish
Oh,
it.
good.
But at that time, they weren't interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah. A different time.
I hope, well, I do know that a granddaughter is a lawyer. My son's a lawyer. 2 sons are lawyers. They're all going to be interested. I have a nephew who is a lawyer.
Oh my goodness.
And he's a grandson of my father. I know they are all going to read it with great interest. I think that some of my lawyer friends will appreciate it because it's got a lot of legal strategies and what's going on behind the scenes and so forth.
Very nice.
Which I think many people have no idea that type of thing goes on.
And has no idea that it was going on back in the 30s.
Well, Stephanie, going back to Sue's book, when she wrote that first book, Chapter of Your Life, before she turned it in, she gave it to me and said, would you look this over? Tell me if it's okay. And I'm a compulsive editor. So I changed a few plurals to singulars and so forth, make the verb and the noun consistent.
Punctuation.
Punctuation. She had a bit of a tendency to write a sentence in the last, or write a paragraph, and the last sentence of the paragraph really should be the first sentence. So some of those I moved.
Luckily, it wasn't on a typewriter.
That's right. I would have not done that.
I gave it back to her, and she said, "Oh, this is great." And then she came to the next one, and she said, "Will you work on this one too?" I thought, I'm learning more about my wife, my new wife.
My new wife. Exactly.
I better stay in the job. So I stayed with her through all the chapters. And
I think that's fabulous.
We had a lot of fun talking about these things. And it's amazing the memory she has for detail.
Yes.
Back when she was 5 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, she can remember what the front porch of a house looked like. It's remarkable. She hasn't written it all down, of course. Nobody would be interested. But it's a very interesting process to see what happens to someone who is writing, and how these things pop up. And dreams can pop up.
Oh, I'm
remember
sure.
those at night.
You know, I say to people when they want to embark on this, it's the adventure of a lifetime.
It is. You're absolutely right.
It really is. It's just, and I also tell people, and then you'll tell me if I'm right about this, that you become a different person.
Absolutely.
Over the course of the writing, and once you're in a library at an author talk holding your book in your hand, or all the things that you've done since, all of the different promotions and people calling you up, and I read your book and I didn't know you did this, or whatever it might be. You're a different person.
I am. That's very true. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Oh, that's just amazing. And all those things that you didn't get a chance to tell your new husband.
Right?
Well, that's behind closed doors.
He found out, but luckily by then the deed was done. It was already a done deed. And I'm so excited when someone's spouse is supportive.
Yes.
You have no idea how many times I'm doing an interview and I'll say to someone, you know, so what did your husband think of the book? I don't think he read it. Oh. I can't even imagine. So I'm so delighted.
Then a win-win.
Yeah, no,
Definitely
that's just
Stephanie.
amazing. So do you think he's going to be as good at editing the fiction that's coming his way next?
I think so, and it's even sort of turned a light bulb on. He'll say, well, why don't you think about adding this?
Yeah, you know, there could be an extra chapter thrown in at the end of, you've opened the box.
And we could almost do it together, I think, because it's still going to be centered in New York. It's still going to be centered around the library.
Right.
But it's maybe the librarian and her personal life and her experiences.
Exactly.
And working in his vast experience with law and
Right.
some of the bad as well as most of the good.
Yeah.
So
So
next year.
So when you two married, you didn't see this was coming.
No. No, we
Definitely
did
not.
You think at this stage of your life, you kind of know what's coming.
I know.
And
That's why I think I said was firmly avowed not to remarry. And so one piece of advice, don't ever say never.
oh, I like that.
Don't ever say never.
Keep the possibilities open. And how about you for advice for our viewers? Marital writing or otherwise?
Well, I told Sue when I asked her to marry me, she said no.
I do love that story. That is one of my favorite stories in this book, that she turned you down.
And I told her then, when I was appointed to the district court, I read a book about being a judge. And the author of the book, who was a former Supreme Court justice, said that there are three things that a trial judge has to have. Number one is patience. Number two is patience. Number three is patience. And I said, I took that to heart. I'm a very patient man, and I will wait. I won't ask you again. Let me know when you're ready.
There we go. And we all know what she said eventually.
Yep.
But to read the full story behind that, which is a fabulous chapter in here, and you are both such a delight. I love what you've done so far. I love what this has done for you.
Us, absolutely.
You know, I love what writing books does for individuals, but I'm seeing what it does for
That's
a couple.
Great experience.
And
Right.
that's just amazing. Well, since you're both so young, there's just so many more books out
There
there
you go.
for you. There's so much more time. So for our viewers, how do you do? My name is Sue. Now you know some of the fun stuff in there. You'll want to grab a copy. An upstate DA, my time as a Steuben County prosecutor in the 1930s. So if you want to see a little old New York, you'll want to check that out. And please take their advice and keep those doors open. Maybe get some writing done. Thanks for joining us.
We're just books up on a shelf. Try to understand this if you